Erika here with PrepScholar GMAT. We are here today with Laura Leszcynski. She's a Wharton MBA, and she's the director of GMAT here at PrepScholar. She'll be answering our questions today about applying to business school, about taking the GMAT, and she'll also be giving us some advice for aspiring Wharton applicants. Laura, thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we're just going to jump right on in. First question is to tell us a bit about your background.
Certainly. So I graduated from Princeton with my undergrad in psychology and a minor in Spanish. And after college, went on to consulting for 4 years in Washington, D.C. I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my degree, and so I thought consulting would give me a broad array of experiences with different industries and different clients, which it definitely did. After about 4 years of consulting, I realized I really wanted to go into brand management. And in order to do so, with most companies, you need an MBA. And so applied to business school, got into Wharton, went for 2 years, of course, for their full-time 2-year program, and then worked at General Mills for 6.5 years in their rotational program with the brand management team. And now I'm here at PrepScholar leading the GMAT course.
Awesome. So you ended up going to Wharton.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you decide on Wharton?
You know, I decided on Wharton for a couple of reasons. The first, obviously, is just the strength of the overall program. Getting experiences with other students from all over the world was something that I really wanted. Another reason was the strength of their brand management or their marketing program. Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, a lot of people think of Wharton as a finance program. But their marketing program is just as, if not better than the finance program, at least based on my experiences. I have a lot of friends from business school who went on to CPG brand management companies from there. And then the third reason for me was I wanted to live in a city. And so Philadelphia, obviously the school being in Philadelphia, was a great opportunity for me to see and experience and live in a new city, which was a lot of fun.
Awesome. So when you were applying to Wharton, how important was the GMAT and your GMAT score as part of your application? How much emphasis did you put on studying for the GMAT?
I put a lot of emphasis into the GMAT, particularly because my GPA in undergrad wasn't the best. I had a low 3 GPA. And there were different reasons for that. Of course, you know, I was an athlete. I was doing other things while in college, as well as obviously the academics. But I wanted to really prove to the admissions committee that my GPA wasn't a reflection necessarily of my high standard, my high academic standard. And so for me, I ended up getting a 710, which when I applied to Wharton was the average. I think the average now is more like a 730. But my goal was to at least get the average so that nothing would stand out to the admissions committee as like a red flag or as something that I needed to overcome in other parts of the application.
Awesome. So when you were studying, how did you study for the GMAT?
So I studied for about 4 to 6 months, I'd say. And it was a combination of a couple of things. It was self-study. So I was lucky in that my roommate at the time was also taking the GMAT. And so on weekends, we would go to my company's office, which was a couple blocks away, and just lock ourselves in a conference room and study. So we kind of forced ourselves, we became our own accountability partners, if you will. That was enough for her. She didn't need to take any courses or anything, but I still felt like I wanted some sort of structured course or prep. So I signed up for 2 in-person courses. One was like a weekend boot camp course, and then another was maybe over a month or 2, you know, once a week, twice a week kind of thing. And they were both in the classroom, structured courses. And I think they both definitely helped. If I were to do it today, I would probably do it a little bit differently. But at the time, it worked for me, and so I went with it.
So would you say that there's anything you did in your GMAT prep process that you would not recommend to someone who's studying for the GMAT today?
Yeah, like I said, there were a couple things I did I would probably do a little differently. It's not that they were terrible, but for example, I took 2 structured classes. I don't know how much value or benefit having the additional class really added. For me, it was more a peace of mind kind of thing to know I was doing everything I can, but I also spent a lot of money on these courses. And then the other thing was I assumed that what worked for my roommate or what worked for my colleague or whatever was also going to work for me. as in self-study on Saturdays or taking this course or whatever. If I were to go back and do it again, I would probably want to do my research a little bit better, just to kind of a little bit more self-reflection of like how I learn, what I needed to learn, and really direct my studying towards what I needed as opposed to what I heard others needed or what worked for others.
Right. That totally makes sense.
Yeah.
So based on your experience, you studied for 4 to 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Would you recommend that same timeline for other students, or would you recommend that they start earlier or not quite so early?
It's hard to make a statement for all students because everyone's so different. It's going to be the amount of time you need to study is really going to be based on your starting point, when the actual test is, what else you have going on in your life, what your goal score is. If your goal score is a 600 versus a 750, you're going to need a lot more time to get to the 750 than you are to the 600. So it really varies student to student. But I would say, on average, students should probably set aside, say, 3 to 4 months to study, and then either add or subtract from that based on their individual circumstances.
Makes sense. And then you went the route of, after undergrad, taking a few years to work before applying for business school. Do you recommend a similar timeline for students, or do you recommend they take the GMAT earlier in the process?
I think both work. I think both have their pros and cons. I think as a college student, you feel so busy and you have so much on your mind thinking about what you're going to do next and where your life is going to take you that adding one more thing onto your plate feels really overwhelming. However, in a lot of ways it makes sense. And I've started recommending to college students that they take it while they're in college for a couple of reasons. Your GMAT score is good for 5 years.
Right.
And so as long as you're planning to apply to business school within 5 years of graduating or within 5 years of taking the GMAT in college, your score will be good. And most students do. I think the average working experience is 3 to 5 years. So most students do apply within that time period. And then the other reason is, while you're in college, you're already in kind of this study, like formal academic mode that you quickly slip out of as soon as you enter the working world. And so as much of a pain as studying for the GMAT now feels like, it's going to be even more of a pain and headache a year or two from now when you're in the working world and you're trying to build your applications and you're trying to do a million other things, as opposed to just doing it now and getting it out of the way. Now, that said, I know a lot of the viewers are not in college and are probably thinking, well, is it too late? No, absolutely not. Most people take the GMAT after school, so it's definitely doable. But if you are still in school, I definitely recommend considering taking it now. Right.
And you're definitely evidence that you can take it several years after college and still be fine, still get into Wharton. So
yeah, that's right.
Awesome. Okay, and then the last question that we've got is, what is your biggest piece of advice for students who are planning to apply to Wharton or to another business school?
I think my biggest piece of advice is to structure the application process in a way that isn't overwhelming. And so, for example, I took the GMAT in December, but it was the December of the year before I was applying because I really wanted to get the GMAT out of the way so that I could focus on other things like community service, building out my story for applications, visiting schools, talking to alumni, et cetera, et cetera. Too many students wait until, say, August or September of the year they want to apply, and then all of a sudden they have to study and take the GMAT, to write their stories, to build their applications, to get their recommendations. It's a lot in 2 or 3 months. And so if you can be planful and plan ahead, that would be my number one recommendation is take the GMAT first, do your reset. Once you have your score and you know kind of what schools are in your reality, do your research, decide what schools you want to apply to, and then start building out the applications.
Awesome. So kind of like GMAT as the first step, and then the rest of that later on.
That's right. Yep.
That's a good advice. Yeah. All right. I think that's about all we have time for. Thank you so much for answering our questions.
Yeah, no problem.
If you liked this video, please leave us a comment below. If you have suggestions for future videos, we definitely want to hear those. And if you have any questions for either me or Laura, we would be happy to answer those as well. You can also hit the button to subscribe. We'll be putting out new GMAT videos every month 3 per month. If you would also like to, we have our free GMAT Prep Scholar blog. The link for that is in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and happy GMAT studies.